What an astonishing win the Springboks pulled off in France on Saturday. We all thought England had the semi-final in the bag, but our team managed a last-minute penalty that put us just 1 point ahead. And that, of course, is all you need, 1 point. This weekend, we will all be on the edge of our seats once more when we face New Zealand in the Rugby World Cup final on Saturday night. But the excitement is being eclipsed a little by an on-field insult apparently hurled by Bongi and Mbonambi. It's now being investigated by World Rugby. Let's dive into this with eNCA sports editor Vata Ngobeni. Good evening, Vata. Always great to chat to you. So, what did he say? We're all sort of dancing around. So let's just call it the C word.
Yeah.
So he's alleged to have called Tom Curry a white C word.
Something. Yeah, a white C word.
Okay.
And it's still an allegation.
Yeah.
Tom Curry did go to the referee, Ben O'Keefe, and said, please tell him to stop calling you this.
Yeah.
And Ben O'Keefe sort of brushed him off and said, let's go on with the game, guys.
Yeah.
He was asked afterwards, the press conference, and this is Tom Curry. And he said, yeah, something that happened in the field, but we move on now. It's over and done with. And England had 48 hours in order to lodge a complaint. That expired this morning, so it's fallen off.
So they didn't lodge a complaint?
They didn't lodge a complaint. World Rugby, on the other hand, as soon as this word got out, now they've gone on their own and launched an investigation into this. So it's not England that have done so. It is World Rugby now that have launched their own investigation into what would have been said on the field. Everyone at the moment said it's just guessing. Everyone's guessing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard so many interesting things. So talk to me about how much Afrikaans the Springbok team talks on the field.
That has been their language for years, Sally. And I think it's one thing they've used as an advantage for the Springboks, unless they're playing in England where you've got a few former South Africans in there, or the Irish team that would have CJ Stander in it. But most of the time, the line-up calls would be in Afrikaans. Some of the moves, and we've seen lately, since Rassie came in, the likes of Lukanyo Am and Mapimpi was speaking closer. Siya Kolisi as well does the same thing as well. So, Afrikaans was commonly the language used by the Springboks, and they still use it as well, and they will mix it a bit of Xhosa as well. So, I think Tom Curry might have gotten lost.
So this is the thing.
We're saying the white side. I think that's what Bongi was saying.
So let's explain for people who don't speak Afrikaans that the Afrikaans word for side, as in that team, that side, is K-A-N-T.
Yes.
Die kant.
Yeah.
Ander kant, die kant, this side, that side.
Just the wit kant.
Yeah.
Which is the white side.
Yes. However,
England, we're white.
If you're speaking Afrikaans, wouldn't he have said wit instead of white? Which is what Tom Curry said he heard.
Well, that's what he alleges he heard.
Yeah.
So against that, it's his word versus that of Bongi.
What potential penalties could he face, though? I mean, could he be pulled off the match?
If World Rugby is as quick as they seem to want to get this matter over and done with, he won't play in a final, and chances are he'll be out for 6 weeks.
Doesn't he have a case of plausible deniability? Because clearly the English weren't going to focus on it. So all they have in terms of recording is what Tom Curry said to O'Keefe.
Ben O'Keefe, the referee.
Right, so he could have misheard. And he posed it as a question. I think he asked, if the hooker calls me a white C word, what do I do? He didn't even say he called me that.
Exactly.
He said if he does. Do you think it's something that, the benefit of the doubt will ultimately likely play out here?
I think, Sally, this is a storm in a teacup. It's made up mainly by the English media. They have been driving this since Sunday. And more than anything, I mean, Tom Curry said, it's over and done with, let's move on. And World Rugby has got to prove that Bongi did say it.
Yes, so how do you do that?
So if there is no recording of him, if none of the mics picked it up, that means he didn't say it. And Tom Curry didn't say that.
If a tree falls in a forest and no one heard it, did it really fall? Okay, I get the reason. I want to ask you a little bit about on-field culture. You know rugby so well. Do the guys really have a go at each other verbally? Because we see how high tensions run to the point where fists are thrown. Is there a lot of verbal trading of insults and comments between the players?
All the time, Sally, all the time. You just when I think about it, when I talk about the interview, and I thought about George Gregan 2003 World Cup they played New Zealand, the All Blacks in the semi-final, and they beat them to make it into the final to play England. And all George Gregan said to one of the All Blacks players was 4 more years, boys, 4 more years. And again, you know, there's a lot of sledging that happens. I mean, players talk amongst each other, they swear at each other, they push and shove each other. So it's just part of the game. You know, I remember Mapimpi and Korobeti last year, you know, with Australia and South Africa. You know, it went on for 2 test matches, you know, in consecutive weeks. And it happens, Sally. It's part of the game.
So why would Curry raise it then if it's part of the game and everyone does it, do you think?
I think it's not about Curry raising it. It's the fact that I think some of the English media heard him go to the ref and ask him, because that was audible.
But why would he raise it with the ref? Why would he even, if it's so much par for the course, why tell the ref?
I think there was an issue between the two of them during the game.
And they've got history, these two, haven't they?
And we saw Bongi refuse to shake his hand after the game.
Okay.
And it does happen, Sally, that players would have a go at each other for years. You know, it's that kind of game. And we know there's no love lost between the English and the Springboks. This has been going on, I think, way before even Rassie came into the picture. We've seen it, I mean, one of the dirtiest games we've seen now. Johan Ackerman got a red card at Twickenham. And again, it seems as if every Springbok coach that gets in, you know, they actually rev up their players by saying, you know, you play against the old colonizers and the old Englishmen, and it seems to get them quite worked up. And it works, so...
Yeah. Interesting, like the whole issue of, is it racism, isn't it? Calling someone white is not an insult, but of course tacking a negative word to it, I suppose, then could be construed as racializing an insult. Do you see that? Because there's also the element of understanding racism as a power dynamic.
Yeah. If Sally the shoe was on the foot and it was Tom Curry who had said to Bongi, you black, we would have all been up in arms. You know, because at times you see racism as if it's only...
And sadly, but the reality is racism against black players is quite common. If you look at the insults hurled to soccer players of colour from the stands, for example. Is it a level playing field, though?
No, it's not, Sally. And I think what's also important is that these kind of incidents, they go against the spirit of the game. You know, rugby is about a game where, you know, 2 teams have a full go at each other, bash each other up, and then afterwards the players are able to go into the change room, have a beer, share wonderful memories. It's one of just those games where you really go to war with somebody and then you fall in love with them afterwards. So, you know, if Bongi did say it, it does go against the spirit of the game. However, that's what happens in war.
Is there any precedent for this?
No, not as far as I can remember. No, prior to the World Cup, Johnny Sexton, the Irish captain, there was an incident of him in the European Cup final where he came from the stands. Captain Leinster, they had lost to La Rochelle, and he went to the ref, Jaco Paper, and apparently, allegedly, called him a cheat. They could read that on the lips, and it happened in front of his kid, and you cannot do that. You cannot call a match official a cheat. And he ran the risk of actually missing out on the World Cup, and he got a sort of minor slap on the wrist.
Right.
So I think without any evidence, it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for Bongi not to play on Saturday.
World Rugby has to work really fast here, because otherwise they risk compromising the Springboks as they prepare for Saturday. They need to know immediately, really, if Bongi Mbonambi is in or out.
I don't think World Rugby wants this to hog the headlines ahead of their biggest match in 4 years. The whole world wants a Springbok World Cup final. This is a dream World Cup final in any World Cup year. And this matter will derail all the attention that should be going to what's going to be happening on the field. And you know, you don't want to see this before a World Cup final, Sally. And I think World Rugby are going to be probably kicking themselves for having launched the investigation without a complaint. But they keep on shooting themselves in the foot at every single turn. We've seen it prior to the tournament. We're seeing it in the tournament itself with the head clashes and so on. And the criticism towards the referees and them not doing anything. You know, it's almost like it's an Animal Farm situation where you find certain nations get away with murder, like England and so on, your tier 1 nations. And we've seen the Samoans and Fijians, and they keep on complaining how they're not getting the rub of the green. by either the referees or...
So there are deeper issues that need exploring. I cannot let you go without asking you. And I had such a chuckle when you told me before we went on air that you, like me, could not watch Saturday. I have noisy neighbours who were cheering every time there was a point. I'd quickly turn over and see, and you just stayed at the braai, you told me, because it's just too stressful. But what do you think the Boks are in their best form to win on Saturday?
They've had two very, very close games. They won the semi-final. They were not at their best. But I can tell you now, Sally, you put the All Blacks in front of the Springboks, something happens. And they'll produce their best, without a shadow of a doubt. They know what's on the line. There's history here. To become the first team to win back-to-back world titles, to become the first team to win 4 Rugby World Cup titles, and see that number 6 jersey, that Webb Ellis trophy. There's a love affair between South Africa, the Business Springboks and the World Cup, and the All Blacks. And most of the time at the World Cup, the Springboks have come on top. We won't talk about 2019, that pool game. We won't talk about 2003, that quarterfinal, but I will remind them of 1999, and we'll remind them of 1995.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for chatting to us. eNCA sports editor Vata Ngobeni.